Clarity is not something you stumble upon. It is something you cultivate with deliberate attention. Many people move through life reacting, adjusting, and adapting to whatever comes their way, yet they never pause long enough to ask themselves the essential questions. What do I truly want? What do I value? What direction am I choosing? A smart woman understands that the absence of clarity is the birthplace of confusion, misaligned relationships, wasted time, and emotional exhaustion. She chooses a different path. She chooses to clear the fog. Clarity begins with self-honesty. It requires the courage to look within and admit what is real, not what is convenient. It asks her to acknowledge her desires without shame and her limitations without fear. Life becomes heavy when she hides from her truth. But when she brings her truth into the light, she begins to see her path with new vision. She stops pretending she is satisfied when she is not. She stops accepting what drains her. She stops downplaying what her heart has been trying to tell her for years. In that moment, power begins to return to her, not from the outside world, but from her own renewed sense of direction. Clarity also requires stillness. Many people believe they can think clearly while living in constant noise, external noise from others' opinions, internal noise from their own fears. But clarity is born in silence. When she steps away from the world, even briefly, she allows her mind to settle. The sediment sinks and the water becomes transparent. She begins to understand what is truly important. She begins to hear her intuition again, a voice that is always present yet often drowned out by the demands of others. When she gives herself these moments of quiet, clarity reveals what confusion had been hiding, that she has always known the answer, she just needed room to hear it. To create clarity, she must also define her values. Without values, decisions become chaotic. With values, a smart woman asks herself what principles guide her life. Is it respect, peace, growth, honesty, purpose? Once she defines her values, she no longer wastes energy on things that do not align with them. She no longer entertains relationships that violate them. She no longer sacrifices her self-respect to avoid temporary discomfort. Values become her foundation, and everything else becomes negotiable. Clarity extends into relationships as well. When she is unclear about her worth, she will attract people who reflect that uncertainty. But when clarity grows within her, confusion dissolves around her. She no longer tolerates mixed signals, inconsistent behavior, or emotional unpredictability. She knows what she wants, and because she knows it, she can ask for it without hesitation. She understands that the right people will meet her where she stands, and the wrong people will fall away on their own. Clarity protects her from becoming lost in someone else's uncertainty. It keeps her grounded in her own truth. In her goals, clarity becomes a map. Without it, even hard work becomes wasteful. She may be busy, but she is not progressing. A smart woman refuses to confuse movement with progress. So she defines her goals with precision. She identifies what she wants to achieve, why it matters, and what steps will lead her there. She no longer scatters her energy across too many paths. She channels it. She focuses it. She sharpens it. This focused energy becomes power, real, measurable power that builds momentum and transforms potential into tangible change. Clarity also requires boundaries. When she knows what she wants, she becomes aware of what she cannot allow. She recognizes that every yes she gives away without thought is a no stolen from something meaningful. She begins to protect her time as if it were sacred. She protects her energy as if it were limited. She protects her peace as if it were the foundation of her life, because it is. Through clarity, she understands that boundaries are not walls but filters. They do not keep the world out, they keep her aligned with the life she is choosing to build. Clarity changes the way she sees herself. Instead of identifying with her fears, she identifies with her potential. Instead of seeking validation from others, she seeks alignment within herself. Instead of living on autopilot, she becomes intentional in every choice. She dresses with intention, speaks with intention, loves with intention, and walks with intention. The world may offer distractions, but she has learned that clarity is the antidote to distraction. When she is clear, distractions no longer tempt her because they have nothing to anchor to. Clarity also strengthens her emotional world. When she is unclear about her feelings, they overwhelm her. But when she understands why she feels what she feels, emotional storms lose their force. She becomes capable of responding instead of reacting. She notices patterns within herself. She becomes aware of her triggers, her needs, her boundaries, and her desires. Emotional clarity becomes emotional power. It allows her to navigate conflict with calmness, to speak her truth without aggression, and to walk away from what harms her without guilt. Clarity is not a one-time revelation. It is a continuous practice. Life changes, circumstances shift, and new experiences reshape her inner world. A smart woman revisits her clarity often. She asks herself again and again, is this still who I am? Is this still what I want? Is this still the right direction? By doing so, she remains aligned with her evolution rather than stuck in outdated versions of herself. Clarity creates power because it removes the friction of uncertainty. It eliminates confusion, reduces emotional chaos, and allows her to act with confidence instead of hesitation. Each step becomes firmer. Each decision becomes lighter. Each moment becomes a reflection of her chosen life instead of a reaction to circumstances she never questioned. Emotional discipline is not the absence of emotion, nor is it the dulling of one's inner world. It is the ability to feel deeply without becoming imprisoned by what arises. A smart woman learns that emotions are powerful forces, but without discipline, they can distort her perception, sabotage her decisions, and drain her energy. When she begins to understand the nature of her emotions, she steps into a new dimension of freedom, one that does not depend on circumstances, but on her inner stability. Emotional discipline begins with awareness. Many people experience emotions but never study them. They react before they reflect. They speak before they pause. They take action while the feeling is still raw. Yet a woman who understands emotional discipline observes the emotion as it rises. She does not judge it. She does not deny it. She simply watches it. She becomes a witness rather than a hostage. This awareness alone reduces the intensity of her emotional storms because she separates her identity from what she is experiencing. She learns that she feels anger, but she is not anger. She feels fear, but she is not fear. She feels sadness, but she is not sadness. In that distinction lies her first taste of freedom. Emotional discipline requires the ability to pause. The pause becomes her sanctuary. It is in this pause that her clarity returns. She breathes. She grounds herself. She allows the wave of emotion to crest and fall. Without this pause, she becomes reactive, and reaction often leads to regret. But in the pause, she remembers her values, her intentions, and the bigger picture. She chooses her response instead of allowing the moment to choose it for her. This small practice transforms the way she navigates conflict, disappointment, and uncertainty. A woman who cultivates emotional discipline understands the difference between expression and explosion. Expression is healthy, necessary, and honest. Explosion is uncontrolled, fueled by unexamined emotion. She learns to express what she feels without harming herself or others. She speaks with clarity rather than chaos. She communicates with purpose rather than pain. She does not fear emotional expression, but she refuses to let it turn into emotional destruction. This balance is a form of inner strength that few develop, yet it becomes one of her greatest assets. Emotional discipline also means understanding the roots of her emotions. Many reactions are not created by the present moment, but triggered by past wounds. When she feels jealousy, she asks herself what insecurity it is trying to reveal. When she feels anger, she asks herself what boundary has been crossed. When she feels anxiety, she listens to the fear beneath it. She no longer treats emotions as random experiences but as messages, signals pointing her toward deeper truths. As she interprets these messages with honesty, she becomes more grounded, more conscious, and more aligned with her true self. There is a profound freedom in realizing that she does not need to suppress her emotions to master them. Suppression only buries pain deeper, allowing it to grow in the dark. Emotional discipline invites her to feel fully but act wisely. She allows the emotion to move through her without letting it dictate her identity or direction. She gives herself permission to cry, rest, reflect, or seek support, but she refuses to be consumed. Emotions flow, but she remains steady. A woman with emotional discipline does not allow someone else's behavior to control her internal state. She stops giving others ownership over her peace. She learns that her reactions are her responsibility. No one can make her lose control unless she hands over that control. She realizes that her emotional stability is not a gift others can give. It is a skill she builds through awareness, practice, and patience. This understanding frees her from the emotional roller coaster of relationships, disappointments, and external judgments. Emotional discipline transforms her communication. Instead of reacting from impulse, she speaks from intention. Instead of lashing out, she articulates what she feels and why she feels it. Instead of shutting down, she leans into vulnerability with clarity. Her presence becomes calming. Others feel safe around her not because she is emotionless, but because she is emotionally anchored. Her words carry weight because they are not drenched in instability. She also becomes better at choosing the environments and relationships that nourish her. Emotional discipline sharpens her intuition. She can sense energetic imbalances quickly. She notices when someone drains her or manipulates her emotions. With this awareness, she withdraws from dynamics that threaten her stability. She invests her emotional energy where it will be respected and reciprocated. The foundation of emotional discipline is self-regulation. She learns techniques that help her stay balanced: breathing exercises, grounding practices, journaling, movement, silence. These are not escapes, they are tools that help her return to herself. When she feels overwhelmed, she does not drown, she anchors. When circumstances become chaotic, she does not collapse, she centers. Through consistent practice, emotional discipline becomes a natural state rather than a forced effort. Emotional discipline also teaches her patience. She understands that every emotion has a lifespan. Anger cools, fear softens, sadness shifts, excitement fades. She becomes aware that if she can sit with a feeling without reacting to it, she gains mastery over herself. She stops rushing into decisions made from temporary states and instead waits until her mind is clear, her heart is steady, and her values are guiding her again. Inner freedom arises when she realizes that her emotions are part of her experience, but not her identity. She stops being controlled by sudden emotional waves. She stops fighting with herself. She stops fearing her own depth. Instead, she learns to navigate her emotional world with grace, strength, and grounded awareness. Boundaries are not barriers that keep people away. They are bridges that guide others toward how you deserve to be treated. A smart woman understands that boundaries are not confrontations, punishments, or emotional walls. They are acts of self-respect, clear expressions of what is acceptable and what is not. Without boundaries, her life becomes filled with confusion, resentment, and exhaustion. With boundaries, her life becomes rooted in clarity, dignity, and emotional peace. A boundary begins with understanding her own worth. When a woman does not recognize her value, she allows others to define it for her. She accepts disrespect disguised as affection, inconsistency disguised as complexity, and emotional neglect disguised as independence. But the moment she realizes that her time, energy, and emotions are sacred, everything changes. She begins to choose herself. She begins to protect herself. She begins to recognize that self-respect is not a thought. It is a decision made repeatedly in the way she allows the world to treat her. Creating boundaries requires self-awareness. She must know what drains her, what hurts her, what overwhelms her, and what disrupts her inner peace. She must pay attention to the subtle discomfort she feels when someone oversteps. Many people ignore those small signals, dismissing them as overreactions. But a smart woman listens. She learns that the body often reacts before the mind understands. A tightening in her chest, a shift in her breathing, a sudden heaviness, these sensations tell her where her boundaries are needed. She begins to trust these signals as guides. Setting boundaries is an act of clarity. She learns to express her needs without apology. She learns to say no without explaining herself endlessly. She learns to communicate her expectations in a calm, direct, and firm manner. She does not rely on hints, silence, or passive resistance. She understands that clarity protects both her and the people around her. When she speaks her truth clearly, confusion dissolves. People know where they stand, and she knows she has honored herself. Boundaries also require consistency. A boundary stated once but violated repeatedly becomes meaningless. She understands that enforcing a boundary is more important than announcing it. When someone crosses a line, she addresses it immediately. She does not wait for patterns to form or for the discomfort to grow into resentment. She does not negotiate her self-respect in moments of loneliness, affection, or fear. She understands that every time she reinforces her boundaries, she strengthens her inner foundation. A woman who sets boundaries does not fear losing people. She understands that anyone who walks away because she demands respect was never aligned with her growth to begin with. She learns that protecting her peace may require releasing certain relationships that thrive on chaos, emotional manipulation, or inconsistency. This release is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of self-preservation. She refuses to shrink herself to make others comfortable. She refuses to sacrifice her integrity to maintain connections that harm her. Boundaries also apply to her relationship with herself. She must learn to protect herself from her own self-sabotage, her own overgiving, her own exhaustion. She sets limits on how much she takes on. She respects her own time by not wasting it on distractions that offer no growth. She respects her own body by not pushing it beyond its capacity. She respects her own dreams by refusing to postpone them for the convenience of others. Self-boundaries are the foundation of self-discipline and self-love. She also learns that boundaries are not fixed, they evolve with her growth. As she becomes more aware of her needs, her boundaries shift. What was once acceptable no longer is. What she tolerated before becomes intolerable. As she rises, her standards rise. She does not apologize for outgrowing situations that once matched her old self. Boundaries evolve because she evolves. A smart woman recognizes that boundaries are not acts of aggression. They are acts of clarity, truth, and emotional responsibility. A boundary says, I respect myself enough to protect my peace, even if it makes others uncomfortable. It says, I choose alignment over pleasing. It says, or I honor who I am becoming. Through boundaries, she transforms her relationships. People around her begin to approach her with more respect because she has set the standard. She no longer entertains inconsistency, excuses, or emotional unpredictability. She expects sincerity and gives sincerity. She expects honesty and gives honesty. She expects effort and gives effort. Boundaries teach others how to treat her, and more importantly, they teach her how to treat herself. Boundaries create emotional freedom. Without them, she becomes entangled in the emotions, expectations, and chaos of others. With them, she becomes anchored. She no longer feels responsible for fixing others' problems or carrying burdens that do not belong to her. She does not internalize guilt for prioritizing herself. She does not feel obligated to be available at all times. She learns that saying no is a complete sentence, and protecting her well-being is not selfish, it is essential. She discovers that boundaries allow her to give more authentically. When she protects her energy, she has more to offer. When she protects her peace, she becomes a stronger presence for the people she loves. When she protects her mind, her creativity flourishes. Boundaries do not reduce her capacity to love, they refine it, strengthen it, and direct it toward what truly deserves her. The more she honors her boundaries, the more she trusts herself. She becomes the guardian of her own life, the protector of her own growth, and the author of her own experience. Boundaries become the quiet, steady expression of her deepest self-respect, shaping her life into one that reflects her worth, her values, and her truth. Solitude is often misunderstood. Many people associate it with loneliness, emptiness, or isolation, believing that being alone is something to avoid or fear. But a smart woman gradually discovers that solitude is not a punishment, it is a profound source of instruction. It is within solitude that she returns to herself, that she hears her inner voice clearly, that she reconnects with the parts of her mind and spirit that daily noise tries to bury. In solitude, she does not feel abandoned, she feels awakened. Solitude becomes her teacher because it strips away distractions. When she is surrounded by constant chatter, opinions, and expectations, her attention scatters. Her energy is divided. Her sense of self becomes blurred. But when she steps into solitude, the external noise fades and the internal world comes into focus. She begins to notice thoughts she has ignored, emotions she has suppressed, and dreams she has postponed. Solitude reveals what she has carried within herself all along but could not hear over the noise of the world. In solitude, she learns to listen, not just to the world around her, but to her own heart. She listens to the quiet nudges of intuition that were once drowned out by obligations and responsibilities. She listens to her fears not to feed them, but to understand them. She listens to her desires, not to chase them impulsively, but to acknowledge their existence. Solitude teaches her that listening is a form of wisdom, and that the answers she seeks often rise from within, not from outside advice or external validation. Solitude also teaches her emotional self-reliance. She begins to understand that her peace cannot depend on someone else's presence or absence. Many people cling to relationships, friendships, or constant companionship because they fear facing themselves. They fear the silence. But a smart woman embraces it. She discovers that she can soothe her own heart, comfort her own mind, and find stability within herself. She no longer seeks others to fill her inner voids. She fills them through awareness, reflection, and inner strengthening. In solitude, she confronts herself honestly. She looks at her strengths without arrogance and her flaws without shame. She acknowledges mistakes without self-punishment and celebrates growth without the need for applause. This honesty becomes the foundation of her maturity. Without the influence of others, she sees who she truly is, not who she is performing to be. Solitude reveals authenticity, and authenticity becomes her compass. Solitude becomes a space for creativity and expansion. When she is alone, her mind is free from the pressures and expectations that limit her imagination. New ideas emerge. New plans take shape. She begins to visualize a life that aligns with her soul rather than one built on societal pressure. Solitude nurtures her creativity, allowing her to dream boldly without fear of judgment. It is in this time alone that she discovers visions that can transform her future. She learns that solitude also strengthens her relationships. When she is comfortable with herself, she is no longer needy, clingy, or dependent. She does not demand constant attention or reassurance from others. She gives space and respects space. She approaches relationships from fullness rather than emptiness. Her connections become healthier, more sincere, and more aligned. Solitude teaches her that love is not grasping, it is sharing, and she can only share herself authentically when she first knows herself deeply. Solitude teaches her patience. She learns that not everything needs an immediate answer or instant reaction. In solitude, she lets problems settle before she responds. She allows her mind to process emotions without rushing. She understands that clarity comes slowly, like morning light rising through the mist. Solitude teaches her to wait, to breathe, and to trust that understanding will emerge in its own time. It also becomes a place of healing. Pain that she numbed for years begins to surface, not to harm her, but to be released. Old wounds rise in the quiet, allowing her to acknowledge them and let them go. She forgives herself for choices made in confusion. She forgives others not to excuse them but to free herself. In the stillness, healing happens naturally because solitude provides the space the heart needs to mend. Solitude teaches her the difference between loneliness and aloneness. Loneliness is the absence of connection. Aloneness is the presence of self. She realizes that being alone does not mean being empty. On the contrary, solitude becomes a sanctuary where she feels full, calm, and rooted. She begins to crave this sacred time with herself because it nourishes her mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. As she embraces solitude, she becomes more grounded. Her presence changes. She no longer reacts impulsively or seeks validation in every direction. She becomes centered, balanced, and deeply aware. Her decisions come from alignment rather than pressure. Her actions come from intention rather than insecurity. She becomes more patient, more observant, more understanding. Solitude sharpens her mind and softens her heart. Solitude teaches her to prioritize her inner world. She begins to realize that the external world is unpredictable, people change, circumstances shift, life evolves. But her inner world, when cultivated through solitude, becomes a steady anchor she can rely on. She learns to return to herself whenever life becomes overwhelming. She learns to breathe deeply, reflect clearly, and choose wisely. In solitude, she discovers who she truly is beneath the roles she plays, the responsibilities she carries, and the expectations placed on her. She meets the woman she is becoming. She meets the woman she wants to be. Solitude teaches her that growth is not loud, it is quiet. Transformation is not dramatic, it is subtle. Wisdom is not always found in crowds, it is found in the stillness she learns to embrace. Consistency is not glamorous, it is not dramatic, it does not attract applause or spark excitement. Yet it is one of the most powerful forces in a woman's life. A smart woman understands that destiny is not formed in rare moments of inspiration, but in the small actions she repeats day after day. Consistency becomes the quiet architect of her future, shaping her character, sharpening her discipline, and building the life she chooses to live. Consistency begins with intention. She does not move through life randomly, hoping that progress will happen on its own. She wakes with purpose, even if the steps are small. She chooses habits that align with her values and goals. She commits to actions that support her growth. She understands that what she does repeatedly becomes who she is becoming. Every choice, no matter how insignificant it seems, builds her future brick by brick. To be consistent, she must first understand her why. Without a meaningful reason behind her actions, consistency becomes difficult, Motivation fades, energy shifts, and distractions arise. But when she knows exactly why she is pursuing a routine, a discipline, or a dream, she becomes unshakable. Her why keeps her anchored when her emotions fluctuate. It keeps her steady when temptation pulls her off course. Her intention becomes the fuel that strengthens her commitment. Consistency requires patience. We live in a world obsessed with instant results, but a woman who understands consistency knows that real change is slow, gradual, and often invisible in the beginning. The early days bring little reward, little progress, and little acknowledgement. But she shows up anyway. She repeats the action even when she doubts herself. She follows the routine even when she cannot see the outcome. She continues, trusting that growth is happening beneath the surface long before it becomes visible. A smart woman understands that consistency is built through discipline, not motivation. Motivation is unreliable. It rises and falls with mood, weather, sleep, or circumstance. Discipline, however, is steady. Discipline is a promise she makes to herself and keeps no matter how she feels. Discipline allows her to move when inspiration is absent. It carries her forward when motivation disappears. Consistency turns discipline into a lifestyle, and discipline turns dreams into achievements. Consistency teaches her resilience. Every time she commits to her routine, she strengthens her mental endurance. She learns to push through discomfort, boredom, and fatigue. She discovers that the moments when she least feels like continuing are the moments that build the most character. She learns that showing up on hard days matters more than showing up on easy days. Her resilience grows with every repetition, shaping her into a woman who can withstand challenges without losing direction. Consistency requires self-respect. When she keeps her promises to herself, she builds internal trust. She stops doubting her abilities because she has evidence of her strength. She no longer feels defeated by setbacks because she knows she can rise again. Self-respect deepens through action, not intention. By showing up repeatedly, she tells herself, I am worthy of my own effort. This internal trust becomes unbreakable. A consistent woman becomes intentional about her environment. She knows that her surroundings influence her habits. She removes distractions, minimizes temptations, and organizes her space in ways that support her routine. She chooses relationships that encourage her growth rather than hinder it. She recognizes that consistency is easier in environments aligned with her values, and she designs her life accordingly. Consistency shapes her character. She becomes dependable, disciplined, and focused. She no longer lives in emotional extremes, starting with great enthusiasm and quitting in silence. She becomes steady, predictable in her goals, balanced in her efforts. Her life stops being a cycle of intense beginnings and abandoned plans. Instead, she builds momentum through steady progress. She becomes the type of woman who finishes what she starts. Consistency also teaches her humility. Real progress is slow. It requires her to work quietly, often without recognition. She shows up without expecting applause. She improves without seeking validation. She grows without broadcasting her efforts. This humility strengthens her. It teaches her that the journey matters more than the attention it brings. She learns to value who she is becoming rather than how others perceive her. Through consistency, she develops confidence. Not the confidence that comes from external praise, but the deep inner confidence born from knowing she can trust herself. She knows that if she sets a goal, she will pursue it. If she makes a plan, she will follow it. If she begins a path, she will stay on it. Her confidence becomes rooted not in words or wishes, but in action repeated over time. Consistency transforms her relationships as well. She stops accepting inconsistency from others because she no longer lives in that pattern herself. She values effort, reliability, and follow-through. She respects people who show up with sincerity and distances herself from those who only appear when convenient. Her own consistency sets the standard for how she allows others to treat her. She also learns that consistency is not perfection. It does not require flawless execution. It requires returning to the path even after deviations. She allows herself grace for mistakes, but does not allow herself to quit. She learns that progress is a rhythm, not a straight line. She celebrates small improvements and recognizes that each step carries her forward. Over time, consistency becomes her strength. It shapes her mind, her habits, her relationships, and her destiny. It transforms what she once viewed as impossible into something achievable through persistent effort. It builds her future quietly, faithfully, and steadily, until one day she looks back and realizes how far she has come through simple daily commitment. Growth is rarely comfortable, and comfort rarely brings growth. A smart woman understands this truth deeply. She knows that comfort is seductive, it lulls the mind into stillness, convinces the heart to settle, and persuades the spirit that there is no need to evolve. But she also knows that every meaningful transformation demands discomfort. It demands effort, sacrifice, and the willingness to step into the unknown. So she chooses growth over comfort, not because it is easy, but because it is the path that leads her to the life she is meant to live. Choosing growth means she must release the illusions that comfort offers. Comfort tells her to stay where she is, even when she feels unfulfilled. Comfort tells her not to question, not to challenge, not to stretch. It promises predictability, but at the cost of potential. Growth, on the other hand, asks her to take risks, to face uncertainty, and to confront the parts of herself she may have avoided. Growth asks her to be courageous, and she chooses courage again and again. She learns that comfort can become a silent trap, a relationship that feels familiar but not aligned, a routine that is easy but uninspiring, a version of herself that is safe but not authentic. Comfortable environments can become cages when they no longer support her evolution. And she refuses to remain trapped in places that diminish her. When something no longer serves her, she listens. When something limits her, she steps back. When something dims her spirit, she begins to walk away. Choosing growth means embracing challenges. Challenges are not threats, they are instructors. They reveal her strength, her patience, her resilience, and her willingness to rise. When life places obstacles in her path, she does not ask, "Why me?" She asks, "What is this teaching me? What is this asking me to become?" She understands that discomfort is a sign that she is expanding beyond the boundaries of her old self. Every challenge becomes a doorway to a wiser, stronger version of herself. Growth demands self-honesty. She must admit where she has held herself back. She must acknowledge the habits that weaken her, the fears that restrict her, and the excuses that keep her from stepping into her potential. This honesty is not easy. It requires vulnerability. But she understands that pretending to be comfortable will not create a meaningful life. So she faces the truth gently but firmly. She sees her flaws as places to evolve, not reasons to shrink. She sees her weaknesses as invitations to strengthen herself. She chooses growth over comfort in her relationships as well. She knows that comfort can lead to attachment even when the relationship is not healthy or aligned. Growth may require difficult conversations, setting boundaries, or walking away from people who cannot meet her where she is. Growth asks her to choose respect over convenience, alignment over familiarity, and self-worth over approval. She understands that a relationship that does not grow becomes stagnant, and she refuses to stay stagnant for anyone. Growth requires her to stretch her mind. She becomes curious, open to learning, and willing to expand her perspective. She reads, listens, observes, and reflects. She seeks knowledge not to appear intelligent, but to become more aware. She challenges her assumptions, releases outdated beliefs, and allows her worldview to evolve. Growth opens her mind to new ideas, new possibilities, and new ways of being. She becomes a student of life, always refining her understanding of herself and the world around her. Choosing growth means embracing discomfort intentionally. Discomfort becomes a sign that she is moving beyond her limitations. When she feels resistance, she does not retreat, she explores. When she feels fear, she does not freeze, she questions. When she feels uncertainty, she does not cling to the familiar, she breathes through the unknown. Discomfort no longer intimidates her. It reminds her that she is alive, evolving, and expanding. Growth also requires discipline. She cannot rely on inspiration alone. She shows up even when she doesn't feel like it. She practices even when progress is slow. She continues even when the results are not visible. Discipline becomes the anchor that carries her through moments of doubt. She knows that consistent effort shapes her future more than fleeting bursts of motivation. Each step, each choice, each repetition becomes an investment in the woman she is becoming. Choosing growth means embracing solitude. It is in solitude that she can reflect, realign, and reorder her inner world. In quiet moments, she hears the voice of her truth. She listens to her intuition, evaluates her direction, and reconnects with her purpose. Growth thrives in stillness, and she honors that stillness as a sacred practice. She also learns that growth is not linear. Some days she feels powerful, confident, and unstoppable. Other days she feels uncertain, tired, or overwhelmed. But she no longer sees setbacks as failures. She sees them as part of the process. She understands that growth includes pauses, recalibrations, and lessons that unfold slowly. She allows herself grace without giving herself excuses. She rests without quitting. She continues without rushing. Choosing growth means trusting herself, trusting that she is capable, trusting that she can adapt, trusting that she can handle whatever comes her way. When she chooses growth over comfort, she steps into her power. She allows life to shape her, refine her, and elevate her. She becomes a woman who does not fear change because she has learned to change with intention.